Hello and welcome. Brett here with ClickMill.co in our weekly live ministry growth training. And so today I've just told Sophie, who is in the call, and we're going to be talking about a common system dynamic that is, in my experience, just common in Christian ministries, just because of the way Christian culture is. And we're going to look at how to resolve this particular dynamic that happens oftentimes in ministry. So, firstly, I will be sharing my screen, but firstly, um, Sophie, I'm going to mute you. If you have questions, you're welcome to just ask anytime, okay?
Okay.
Awesome. So, okay, so in ministries, a ministry is a system. Okay. Now, at some point, and if you're interested in a course on systems theory, that is sort of like an extension to probably like engineering, very relevant to social systems like a church. But a system is when a group of elements work together to create a result. So, for example, your engine, the engine in a car is a system, and all the parts work together to accomplish a purpose, which is to move that car forward. Now, you can have systems that are either totally non-functional or they're not reliable. So oftentimes you'll have an issue with the car and you haven't taken it to get fixed. And so what happens is maybe the car doesn't always start, or maybe it makes a really crazy noise while it's moving. And there are some, um, there are some, maybe we would say, idiosyncrasies, some unique qualities about the system that maybe aren't positive. And so what we want to do in our ministries is have healthy systems. Okay, so now I said that we're talking about a system dynamic. Now, what happens with systems is there are patterns of things that can go wrong. So if your starter's out and you know anything about cars and you turn the key and nothing happens, you know that your starter's going out. If, or forgive me, if you hear a clicking, but the car doesn't come on, then your starter's out. But if nothing happens, you kind of know that the battery's not good because there's no power at all. And so as you understand different types of systems and how they function, you can understand the dynamics of the system and you can sort of be a doctor for the system, and you can go in and start identifying specific problems. So today I want to teach you a specific problem in how we allocate resources in ministry and how that affects the people in the ministry when it comes to things like volunteer burnout and pastor burnout and people leaving the ministry, especially when it's happening faster than we can get new people in the ministry. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get into this. Sophie, you doing okay? You have any questions on any of this so far?
No, I don't. No questions.
Awesome. Okay, so here on the screen, can you see my screen yet? There we go. Okay.
Yes, I can. I can see your screen.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. So, um, the first thing that we want to look at within ministries is where we're putting our resources. Now, in these courses, in the trainings here at ClickMill, we talk a lot about resources because if we want to know how to build something, if we want to know how to grow something at the very base level, we're taking something, we're putting it somewhere, and then we're hoping to get more back. That's what growth is. If I take a seed and I put a seed in the ground, I'm hoping to get more back in the future, which is, let's say if I put a wheat seed, I don't know what it's called, a wheat seed, a wheat kernel, and I put wheat in the ground, I'm hoping I get a plant that has 100 wheat kernels on it. So I put one in and I get 100 back. That's called a harvest or a return or fruit. In investing, same exact concept, different language. It's called profit. In business, it's called profit. Okay. So now, again, profit, I'm not saying financially, this is what our main goal. I'm just saying that growth happens the same way in all industries. If you look at cattle raising, you have two cows, and the hope is that they have babies, and then you have more than two cows. That is fruitfulness, profit. Go. What does God tell Adam and Eve? Go forth and be fruitful and multiply. Something to that effect. Okay, so they're supposed to increase. And so to understand the system that God has put in place in the natural world for increase, we've got to boil it down to the simplest components. And those are the things that we're trying to increase. So what do I have when I invest? When I invest this thing, I could get an increase, because we have to look at what we're doing with the most essential components that we're investing into ministries or into our family or into our Christian businesses, whatever it is. So the resources that we have to invest are only our time, our energy, our financial resources, so money, okay? Energy, by energy, I'm saying physical energy to move and do things. If I go on a run and I run a lot, I'm going to be tired. My physical energy is drained, okay? Attention is my ability to focus. And I love reading. As you can see, I read a lot. But also, I can only read so much. And sometimes, I'll read a really dense book. But my mind gets tired and I start reading the same line over and over. And I'm like, man, I can't focus anymore. Why? Because my attention is spent. But I can still move around and go do stuff. I'm not physically tired. I've got plenty of energy in my body. And a lot of people have a similar experience where we can focus for some amount of time, but I can go on a jog. I don't got to think while I'm on a jog. I still have my physical energy left. So these, in my opinion, are separate, and this isn't any hard, fast rules. I'm just trying to break these down as far as we can. Now, lastly is decisions. Decisions are a resource. And I want to actually clean this up a little bit. I don't like, there we go. Decisions are a resource that you have to invest. And the reason why I say this, and this is a very foreign concept until you get to a certain point, resources, resources. Okay. So when you get to a certain point and you're running a large ministry or you're running a business, all you do is make decisions. And this is in the decision-making course, so I would really encourage you take that course. High stakes decision-making in ministry is what I believe we've titled it. And it's also, we talk a lot about sacrifice, because decision, the word comes from the root word, I believe in the Latin, of scissio. And scissio, so that's the etymology. Scissio is like scissors or incision when you're in surgery. And scissio means to cut off from. So when a doctor is making an incision, they're going to be cutting something out, right? They're cutting. When you cut something with scissors, you're cutting something. When you make a decision, a true decision is a decision where you have permanently separated from one option. So you've got, let's say, at least two options, maybe there's more, and you're saying, I'm going to cut this part of reality off. That is no longer, we had potential. We have a potential to go one of two ways. And now I'm going to cut off this entire possible reality. Okay. Now, the bigger the decisions, so I'm sacrificing what could come to be with my decision. And the larger the ministry gets, the more people that are involved in this, the higher the financial stakes that are at play, the more difficult the choice is, the more difficult the decisions are to make, because you're choosing to lose something and it's painful. So that takes a lot of inner, like, I don't know what you want to say, like grit or willpower, but it's really exhausting. And so what happens is when you have high performance people who have grown something and then all they're doing is making a lot of decisions, they actually get what's called decision fatigue. And they're like, I cannot think about decisions anymore. I can't make any more decisions today because I cannot make good decisions at this point because I've used up that ability. Now, I have heard about that for years and years, studying other people who, try to create large businesses and large ministries. It was always foreign until recently, as ClickMail has started to grow in the last few years. And I absolutely have times where I'm like, man, I've got to get some rest. So these are maybe some of the resources. This isn't to say this is an exhaustive list, but they're definitely some of the primary resources we have. Now, something else to be aware of in these resources that we have to invest in our ministry is that some of them come back and some of them don't. So if I get a good night's rest and I eat healthy, I'm going to rejuvenate every day, and I'm going to have new decisions, new attention. I'm going to have more energy. Okay, now finances, new financial resources. is not the easiest thing to come into, but you can always get more money. There is always more money out there. And if you have a ministry that really is making a difference, people are going to want to invest in that. If you have a business that's helping people, people are going to want to invest in that. Okay, so you can always get more finances. Even it's not necessarily that it's easy, but you can do it because it's out there. Now, time, you don't know how much you have, and it's limited. So you could run out of time tomorrow and go meet Jesus, or you could run out of time in 50 years and go meet Jesus. Well, I don't know, and you don't know. So we're using a resource with time that is not only limited, but we don't know how much we have. We're spending it. Just like money, you spend time, you spend energy. And God gives us accountability for these resources, and we're going to be asked at some point, what'd you do with those resources? And so when I look at resources, and this is the same with many other investors and business people who have large businesses and large ministries, all this other stuff is important, but my time is the most important thing because that doesn't renew. That is limited, and I don't know how much I have. And once that's done, it's done. So I need to make sure that the time is being invested in the most wisely, okay? Because that's one I can't get more of. Now, these are our resources. Sophie, any questions on resources or the things that God has sort of given you control over? We might even see this maybe in the parable of the talents, right? God blesses us with a certain amount of stuff to steward. Any questions on any of that before we keep going with how this applies to ministry?
No, I do not have questions. No questions yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, anytime. Okay, so first thing here is how do we invest these in many ministries? Now, Sophia, I am not in Nigeria, so I can't speak to Nigerian churches. I am in the United States, and I'm familiar with obviously Western culture. And so I can speak to how this is done in my experience in the West. So I'm going to explain how most churches organize these resources. Okay, so when we talk about a ministry, a lot of times here in the United States, at least, we talk about the door and the core, and we'll say something like, how do we get visitors from the door of the church to the core of the church? Like people who are coming, they're involved in ministries, their kids are in the ministries, like they're really part of the community. So how do we get them to the core from the door? Or we might say, how do we make our front door bigger? And what we mean by that is, how do we get more people in church? Or, yeah, so these are some of the ways that we talk about churches. So I've just used this language. I think ministry leaders are fairly familiar with it. Where do we invest our resources in Western ministries? Well, we take our resources and we allocate them primarily to the masses. Okay, so you'll notice out here, we've got the masses. These are just the people that are coming. Maybe we don't know them. They might, they might not even be in the church. I just responded to a YouTube comment where a gentleman was discussing how his church has a benevolence ministry and they pay rent, they provide food, they fix cars, they do all this stuff for people out in the community outside their church. Okay, so where is their ministry allocating the resources? Well, obviously that takes time. That takes financial resources. Someone's making decisions to allocate those funds. That takes attention because you're obviously thinking. So they're investing a lot of resources. And I wouldn't even say in here, in this circle, they're going further out. They're putting those resources completely outside the church. Okay, so then what happens? Well, we want to invest resources to get people like the benevolence ministry. We go and help people outside the church to get them to come into the front door. So this is the door. So they come in the door on Sunday or whenever church is. And what do? We get all of our volunteers. We put one person at every door. We have smiling greeters. We have connect booths. We have pastors mingling in the lobby, building relationships, really loving on people, coffee, donuts, super comfy chairs, like whatever it is that we do here, at least in the United States, and to whatever degree in other countries, we're putting the most resources outside the front door and or right at the front door. Because what do we want? We want to grow. So where do we put the resources? At the new people to show them this is the greatest church. You should be here. Okay, and then what happens? And this is where I want to show you this system dynamic, okay? What happens when we allocate this way? So then what happens? Well, there's a lot of things going on, and the pastor is probably overwhelmed. Pastor burnout in the United States is a really big problem. A lot of pastors do not make it very long in ministry because they just hit a wall and they're exhausted. So they're overworking themselves. And well intentioned too. You know, they're doing their best. Now, once people come back week 2, even third week, fourth week, and they're no longer new visitors. So the resources, they're coming here. They're coming into, yeah, well, okay, I kind of come here sometimes. This is an okay church. I want to check it out a little more. And what do? We invite them to volunteer. And we say, hey, come on over here. Oh, we really care about you. We really want a relationship with you. And they're feeling cared about because you just put a whole bunch of resources to them. And so they come further in. And then we say, well, hey, we've committed a lot of, we don't say it this way, but this is essentially how it comes across on a relational level is, hey, we've committed a lot of resources to you because we care about you. We want a relationship with you. Come on in, have a relationship with us and volunteer and take on some of the responsibility. And the natural answer is yes, because you don't want to tell someone no. So right there, even if you don't want to, you'll probably say yes. But oh, looks like we lost Sophie. There we go. So if you are doing great and these people are feeling really cared about and they are excited, we then bring them in as volunteers. We'll call this on the 72 track here. So right here, and they come in as a volunteer. Well, where are the resources? The resources are still at the door. So you have committed a lot to them. They feel cared for, and so they're committing to you. But what happens when they come further in? They have committed more, but you have committed less. Why? Because the resources are still at the front door, and we're not giving as many resources to those volunteers. So they come in, you're like, hey, we need you to do this thing, but we don't have training. Well, we don't have the resources for that. We don't know how to do that. So figure it out. And of course, we don't say that, but that is the basic idea. If you don't have training and you're asking someone to do the thing that we don't train them for, basically it's like you're on your own, figure it out. Okay, so we don't have training for them, and we don't necessarily have support systems. We aren't still giving them the same amount of time or attention or any of this other stuff. And so we have withdrawn our resources and then asked them to do more. And this is what we call a win-lose. The ministry is winning at the expense of the volunteer. Okay, now the promise continues. Well, okay, if you volunteer, but commit more, take on more things. And then they take on more things thinking, well, if I commit more, surely more will be committed to me and I'll be able to grow. And like whatever it is that they're hoping for, whatever that need is, they're volunteering because they have a need for community or training or whatever it is. And the more they commit, they think, well, surely I'll get more of that need met as I commit more. Okay. And this is human nature. People go where their needs are met and they stay where their needs are met consistently. Well, they commit more and come closer to the core. And where are the resources? Well, the resources that were there were out here and where you're only volunteering a little, because what are we doing? Well, come on in a little more. And even more resources are at the door. So actually, the further they come in, the less they're incentivized to stay. So the most important people are the people who are burning out, the people who are maybe even feeling taken advantage of. And again, that's not intentional. And so what we have is a reverse incentive structure where we give all of our resources to people at the door who are completely uncommitted. And the further people commit, the less we give to them. Now, then what happens in the church? You have church members, congregants, volunteers who are like really committed, and even pastors, right? Pastors really have an issue burning out, and that's over here in the core. Why are pastors so exhausted? Because the people who should be the most filled and pouring out are the people who have the least. They're the least filled because all of the other pastors are also focused on the door. So there's actually no continuing education within the ministry. There's no of these other positive filling, training, teaching, spiritual, like within the ministry team itself, there is a lack and everybody is just serving all of the time. So of course you have ministry leaders burning out as well. So if we're asking, why am I losing volunteers? It is because people go where their needs are met. And this isn't always the case, but this is a very common theme that I have seen in my experience working and consulting with ministries. So if people are burning out of ministry, if they're burning out of your church, one of the reasons is because people go where their needs are met and they stay where their needs are met consistently. So if you have people coming to the front door, they believe their needs are going to be met. If they're coming in to start volunteering, they're still believing their needs are going to be met. But if you have volunteers and ministry leaders and longtime churchgoers who are no longer coming to church, it is because they no longer believe their needs are being met and they don't think you're going to meet them. Why? Because the resources are all being thrown out of the church or to the front door to the people we don't even know and who haven't committed anything. Okay. Now, this is still kind of making sense. It's like, yeah, that's what we do. Of course, we want to give resources to the people on the outside so, they come inside. And this is actually quite opposite of how Jesus ran his ministry. So I want to go and I want to shift over to Jesus' ministry. And so who did Jesus have in his ministry? Well, he had the core, so we'll just call that Jesus. And then he had the three, Peter, James, and John. And the three had what? The least amount of training, the least of who did Jesus give the resources to? He gave it to the 3 and the 12. So the 3 got exclusive access to the Transfiguration and 2 other events, and I forget what they are off the top of my head, but they got the closest training of anybody. And they were also what? The most committed. The 3 were the most committed. And then we have the 12, and the 3 and the 12, not a huge difference because he lived with both of them. He spent 3 years day and night with these guys. And so who else got the most resources? Well, the 12. And what did they do? He said, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men, right? To Peter, James, and John and Simon. And what'd they do? They left everything. They left everything and followed him. And what did he do? He committed everything to them. He lived with them. He taught with them. He showed them. He explained more to them than he explained to the crowds and the masses. He says, I gave to them what they could understand, and I'm going to give to you more because you understand more. And so he gives them way more resources. Okay. And then what happens also, as he gives them more resources, he calls them to harder things. Okay. So the 12, what does he call them to? Well, you're going to be basically the future leaders of the church, and you're going to die for it. I mean, that's, maybe he didn't say it, but that was in there, whether or not they knew it. And, people are going to hate you because of me. Okay. So he told them in no uncertain terms. So you're going to die. You're going to commit your life. And over here, you've got, Peter, the rock of the church. On you, I will build my church. Okay. Well, that is a large, large ask. Okay. You have to be a certain kind of person who is ready for that. But he has the training. So he's called to a higher level of, what do you want to say? Commitment. Okay. So he committed a lot to Jesus. Jesus committed a lot to him. And then he's called and asked of more. Okay. Now, what do we have when we go to the 72? Well, the 72 are trained a good amount. They're following Jesus, but he's not living with them day and night. But he is training them. Now, what does he do? He does call them to action too. So when he calls the 72 to action, he says, only take a few things with you. He says, don't take this, don't take this, don't take this. And I don't have the verse right in front of me. You're welcome to go look these up. It's the sending out of the 72, and you can look at the sending out of the 12. The sending out of the 72, he tells them not to take certain things. In the sending out of the 12, he says, take nothing. So it seems like the call to actions are even harder when you're more committed and when you have more training. So as people commit to Jesus, he commits more to them, and then he calls them to higher and more difficult tasks because they have the required training. So Jesus's resources start in the middle, and then who does he give the resources to least? actually the masses. Now, do we know about the preaching of the 4,000 and the preaching to the 5,000? He's going around, I believe in Luke 4, where he's healing and teaching and preaching, and people from all over follow him. Yeah, of course he does that. But is that his primary ministry? Is that where most of his no? That's like the exception, not the rule. Now, do people come to him? Yes, because he meets their needs. But where does he focus the attention? 72 and then 12 and mostly the 3. And what does he tell the masses? He doesn't say, come on, follow me, follow me. No, he actually tries to get away from the masses. He says things like, go and sin no more, go away. And after preaching, he'll go and hide away from the masses to get time to pray. And sometimes, like in the Garden of Gethsemane, prior to his crucifixion, he goes away and prays in the garden, but he takes the 12 with him. So he's actually removing himself from the masses because that is extraordinarily exhausting. And when you think of this from a resource investment sort of perspective, how many resources can you sink into 3 people? Well, only so much. And you can make some really strong people if you invest into 3. How many resources can you invest into 12? Well, a lot more than 3 because there's 12. Well, what about 72? Well, even more. What about the masses? Unlimited. You can spend every resource you have on the masses. And there's so many people. How much growth are you really going to get from them? Who knows? It is just an endless black hole that you can put resources into. And so I'm going to switch the screen over here. And you will see that Jesus, and I've got my little thing here messed up a little bit. You will see here that Jesus has his resources allocated this way. Most of the people in the center, least to the people on the outside. And this also seems to be the case with the passage in Acts that says no one among them had need. Okay, so the church is growing, and people are bringing they're selling their houses and bringing the money for their property or their cattle, whatever it is they're selling their possessions, and they're saying here to the apostles, the 12 disciples, and they're saying, use this for the ministry. And they are distributing that money to who? To the people. Oops, excuse me. They're distributing those funds to the people in the ministry. They're not sending it out to the people on the streets. They're saying no one among the book of Acts says no one among the people in the church, those who are saved and are a part of the ministry, none of those people had need. So where are essentially all of the resources in the early church going? They're going to people who have committed to the ministry. So I want you to think about what happens logically if instead of sending all the resources outside the church, we bring all the resources inside the church. Okay, and this isn't to say that we can't help people outside the church, because obviously we want to do outreach. We do want to do missions. They're like, this stuff is important. I'm speaking more generally here. If generally we centralize the resources on the people in the church, does the church grow or does the church shrink? When we send all of the resources outside the church, I'm going to flip this arrow so we've got a good idea. When we send the resources outside the church and we say, hey, everybody, we're meeting your needs. Here's help. Here you go. Well, thank you. And then what are they incentivized to do? Nothing. They just got all of the reward, all of their needs met, doing nothing. Okay. And this is like my kids. If this is a behavior chart and I say, you don't have to act or engage or behave in any kind of way, you do whatever you want, and I'm just going to give you candy all the time. How are they going to behave? Like little monsters, because that's how children behave. What happens when I say, okay, well, you can have candy, but you have to behave in this way? And it's almost a reward for your behavior. What do? Well, now, what do they want? They want that need met. They want to have candy. They want sugar. And so what happens? They start behaving in a certain way to get it. So when we send all the resources outside the church and we say, hey, do whatever you want. We're just going to benevolence ministry, give you whatever you ask every time your hands are open. we're just enabling people, and we're enabling them outside the church, and they have no reason to come inside the church. This is not what we see Jesus do. What Jesus does is he goes out, he meets a need outside the church. For example, with Peter, James, and John on the boats, he goes, "Oh, you guys are fishermen and you don't have fish. Yeah, we fished all night. We have no fish. Okay, go put your nets over." And he provides for them with a real physical, tangible need. So they have tons and tons of fish. And then what does he say? So he goes out and then he says, "Hey, if you love those fish, come over here. I got something better for you." So he gives a call to action and brings them in. That's how they get more. So he gives them one blessing outside and then he says, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." He goes, "You like those fish? That's probably worth half a fortune because apparently it was a miracle and there's tons of fish and their boats are sinking. What do they do with those fish? They sell them to provide for their families. They have a lot of money in fish sitting in their boats." And he goes, "You like those fish? Follow me and I've got something better. I'll make you fishers of men." Do they even know what that means? Probably not. What does it mean to fish for men? That doesn't make any sense. If you just thought about that, you'd go, I don't know what he's talking about. But he says the fish in the boats that he just provided aren't even the good part. And what they do, they left the fish in the boats and they went and they followed him. Okay. So yes, we can allocate some resources to the outside, but then we call people to action and the majority of the resources are allocated on the inside. Now, what happens? We go out, we allocate a little bit of resources to people on the outside, and we get them looking in the church. And what do they see inside the church? Nobody is without need. Excuse me. There is no one among them that has need. And they look into that. What is that? That is a little reflection of heaven. It is a place where people are helping each other grow and building one another. And the church is helping those who are in need inside the church. And I've been to so many churches where they'll go and they'll give money to some other continent with people they've never met, but they won't help people that are having car trouble that have been in the church for 4 years and have been tithing consistently, and now they're in a bind. That is very backwards from what we see in the New Testament. The New Testament puts the resources inside the church. So when you go out and you reach to people outside the church, you meet a need, and then you invite them in and they're like, I don't know, maybe. And they look in and they go, wow, that place looks great. Actually, I do want to be in there. Why? Because we have made a positive incentive structure to be inside the church. So as soon as they come inside the front door, there's more resources allocated to them. And that's the least, right? When they become a volunteer, the 72, there's even more time and training and ministry and discipleship allocated to them. And the further in they come, the better their life gets. Because what are we doing? We are helping them to live a better, more godly life the further in they come. And so what do people then want to do? They want to push further and further and further into the ministry because that is where all of the resources are. So we have now a positive incentive structure that stops this cycle of the people inside my ministry or inside my family or inside my business, they're leaving because the more they commit, the less I commit to them. No, we flipped it. And this is one of the reasons why here at ClickMail, do we have blogs? Yeah, we have blogs. And we put a lot of effort into our blogs, but I write one blog and people can read that for 10 years. That is not a lot of effort. These videos take a lot of effort. And why do I give you these videos? Because you're here, you're actually committed. If you're watching this, you're in some kind of a subscription plan. Okay, I'm going to commit more to you because you have committed more to me. And there's nothing that is actually biblical. That is what we see Jesus do. So as people commit more, they get more. And what I'm asking for, what I ask myself is how do I make the experience here at ClickMail better for my team than it is for my clients? How do I make it better for the interns here at ClickMail than it is for my clients? How do I add more benefits for them? Because they're the ones that make it all happen. If I lose all of the interns, if I lose my staff, I cannot do all of this by myself. It is impossible. It would collapse around me. So I need to be allocating the most resources to them and making sure that I'm helping them with their projects, that I'm giving them training to build their own lives and to make their lives better and whatever it is that they're trying to do. And so now what happens, and I'm going to go back to the end of this toxic cycle that happens with the church. So when we allocate the resources to the outside, this is what happens. People come in, we make them real happy. We say, hey, we care about you. We love you. You should volunteer. Then they start volunteering. And what do they feel more cared about? Do they feel like their needs are more met? No, they feel like their needs are less met. Sometimes we get a little disgruntled. And I've been volunteering at churches since I was very young. So I've seen it. I've seen it the positive way and I've seen it the toxic way. We get a little upset. We feel taken advantage of. And we come in a little bit and it's like, and then we're asked to do even more. Oh, we've got the volunteer. Great. We need you for an extra 5 hours a week. We need you for an extra 10 hours a week. Well, hold on. I didn't sign up for that. Well, yeah, but we really need you. We need you to sacrifice for the Lord. So the further in they come, the more burnt out, the more taken advantage of they're feeling, because where are the resources? At the door. And then what happens? They burn out and they quit coming, or they quit coming consistently. Now, what happens? When that begins to happen, all of the responsibilities those committed volunteers were doing falls on who? It falls on the people in the core. It falls on the ministry team. If my staff up and leaves, if my interns up and leave, anything and everything they're doing is now my responsibility because I am ultimately responsible. Well, what happens when the ministry is bigger than me? What happens when the ministry is bigger than you and your limited resources, you collapse because the weight of those responsibilities is way too big. And then what do we do when those responsibilities start falling on the ministry leader or the business owner? What happens? We panic. And where do we put the resources? Right back at the front door, except we do it like really intensely this time. And we're like, oh yeah, we really care about you. Look, here's a bunch of stuff. Volunteer. And now we have this sort of panic volunteer doom loop. Because what happens as soon as they become a volunteer, now we've got even less resources for them because all of the resources, even more resources, are back at the front door. And we're losing people inside, and it just keeps reinforcing this. We got to get people off the front door to volunteer, and we just keep cycling it. And so we continue to lose and hollow out the inside of the church while people may or may not even be coming to the front door in increasing numbers. So this is sort of what I call the volunteer doom loop. And I've seen this in so many ministries. How do we get more volunteers? And this is the wrong question. The question that I would say, and this will get you more volunteers if you ask it this way, how do I give my volunteers and my most committed volunteers a better experience? And not just experience, but how do I meet their needs better than we even meet the needs of the people coming to church and attending church? You need to incentivize and create some kind of incentivization plan for the people who are committed to your volunteers. They are the most important part of your ministry. The people who are committed to you are going to go out and be the most impactful people in the world around your church. It's not the people in the pews on Sunday that are going to make the difference in the community. It's the 12 who are with you day in and day out, volunteering for free. So this applies to me too. I'm preaching to myself because we have Sophia is here. Sophia is in Nigeria. Sophia is here in an internship plan where she has committed 500 hours over 6 months to learn digital marketing and digital ministry. And Sophia is going to be doing a lot of tasks here on the back end of ClickMail. And if I do not take good care of Sophie, Sophie is not going to want to be here. And that would be a huge problem. And what I have to understand is that I have to make sure that Sophie is better taken care of than even our clients. Because why? Our clients are the 72. Now, are we taking good care of our clients? Yeah, absolutely. But the interns are our 12. They are serving the clients. They are the people that I cannot do it without. Or I at least cannot do it at nearly the scale without. And so I need the strongest possible people closest to me. So the more I equip Sophie, the more she can go and equip ministries that we're in relationship with and that we're serving. The more I equip Sophie, the more she can go out and film YouTube videos or write articles that are going to help the masses. But if Sophie is not equipped well and she is feeling taken advantage of, I have a major problem in my marketplace ministry, my business that is a ministry. So this is what I call the toxic volunteer doom loop. And you do not want to fall into this in your ministry. And if you are, this is how you stop it. And this is going to bring us to the end of the lesson. And Sophie, if you have any questions after this, I'd be happy to talk more about it, or if you have thoughts or comments. So the way that you stop this, it is actually a very painful process, and it is why it's so hard to get out of, but it's also reality. So in order to stop the volunteer doom loop, what is happening? You don't have enough resources inside the church to meet the needs on the outside of the church, or, to meet the needs of Sunday service and all this stuff. Okay. And so what you want to do then is you have to cut your expenses. And what I mean by that is you have to cut time, energy, finance, attention, and decision stuff. You have to cut it out. And so you need to learn a way to cut things that are the least painful to cut, that will result in the least negative consequences for your ministry, but you do not have a choice. If you're stuck in this sort of doom loop, you have to cut the expenses from your resources. And then what do you do when you cut? And usually that's going to come from the front door. And I mean, that would just right there freak people out. Cut what is being given to the people at the front door. And with what you save, you allocate it more to the people inside your ministry. Now, here's what's going to happen. This is not a short fix. This is a permanent fix. On the front end, people are going to be like, oh, this isn't as good as that other church down the road. They have donuts. They have comfy cushion chairs. They have all this other stuff. And they have those things. And I'm going to go there because it's a better experience. Okay, good. We care about you. We'd love to have you here. But if that's really the only reason you're here, that's not why we want people here. Okay. We're here for community. We're here for building people up. And you start doing that, you give it about 6 months to a year, and your 100% core focus is to make people's lives better inside the church with the resources, people are going to start noticing. This is happening here at ClickMill. We went from 2 interns to 4 interns, and now we've got more interns than we can even handle. We have so many intern requests coming in. People are spreading word of mouth right now in Nigeria because they found out what the internship does. And so the more needs you meet, the more people will find out about it, and then they will come running to you. That is what happens in the New Testament with Jesus. He's meeting needs, he's healing people. They go walk across the Syrian desert, I believe in Matthew 4, again, could be wrong. They go walk across the Syrian desert, grab their friends, and then walk back across the Syrian desert with their friends who are blind and lame and all this stuff, and he heals them. So they're not just walking across the desert, they're doing it twice, and on the way back, they're carrying and helping crippled and blind and lame people cross a desert. You got to be motivated to do that. Why? Because he's meeting needs. So as people commit more to your ministry, you meet more needs, and people will start coming, and they'll commit for the right reasons, not because it's a good experience and you have an electric guitar and a super cool light show and donuts. They'll commit because there's relationship, because there's community, because when they become a volunteer, they don't want to take the trash out for no reason. What they really want to do is they want to become you. They want to be the pastor. When people work here at ClickMill, they don't come in here. Sophie is not here to do a bunch of work for me for free. She's here to learn skills and to learn how to do all of the things I do so she can provide for her family, and so she can make a difference in her community and make some kind of kingdom impact. And that is my job, is to do the discipling and the training to make that a reality. And when I do that well, more people will show up. So this is how you stop it. So you have to make hard cuts to the expenses to the people who are not committing, reallocate those resources to the people who are committing. And what you will see in the short run for 6 months to a year, maybe longer, depending on how entrenched this cycle is, you're going to see people lose interest, because what you're giving them is the sugar, and when you cut the sugar off, they're going to go somewhere else with sugar, and you're going to see a drop. And, unfortunately for a lot of ministries, the reason they can't actually implement this fix is because they can't sustain the drop. They need they need those people. Otherwise, they have to close their doors. So given that you can sustain, you can get through that drop and you can grit through it and cut down to bare bones, when you start meeting needs, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, what you plant today is usually growing up in about 6 months to a year. This is in real life, not in farming, that too, but you're going to see people committing. You're going to see people coming in for the right reasons, because you're actually doing ministry and developing people as they come in. You've positively incentivized it, and they're going to be coming into the core. So that's the training. So if you have any thoughts or any comments or connections you're making, have you heard this before? I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yes, I have. You talked about resources, talk about human resources, and people sticking where they think they have, they're getting value. Well, that is true. In my experience, I have the ministry I do attend, my church, my local assembly. It's very shocking that this is a ministry of over 6,000 people. Then I remember when the ministry started here in my city, because it was previously in another city. Remember when the ministry started and there was a call for volunteers, that means church workers. We're over 8,000 or more, up to 2,000 who attended that meeting just to be volunteers. And I feel like that happened because they must have gotten value over the years from the head pastor over the years. That's why people stick around. And that's like you said, a lot of people will not stick around if they feel like they're not getting value. I think the reason why a lot of us interns here in Click Me are staying back and seeing it through, because we are actually getting value for our time. We are growing both spiritually and mentally. Transformation is taking place. So yes, I think that everybody needs to learn how to create incentives, even spiritual incentives to exist, even in Christian cycles. Because I've seen in Christian cycles where they just want to use you and use you and use you till there's nothing left in you. Yeah, I've seen cycles like that. So this is a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, I liked what you said about the spiritual incentives. Like, can you imagine? It's like volunteer, and it's like anybody who's been volunteering at church for 6 months gets to come into the super volunteer program, whatever that is, and they get to come to late night prayer with the pastor, where they just get to join in with the pastor who is praying, and they get to learn to pray with the pastor. Nobody else gets access, right? That's like Jesus and the 12. You get to come and have exclusive access to me, which is what we do in the internship and these other programs here at ClickMill. The further in you come, the more access you get. That is how course platforms and schools, that's how everybody orders it, because they've just figured out it works. And unfortunately, we've forgotten that in the church. And so the more you commit, the more access you get. Well, sure, spiritual access. There's an all-night prayer at a ministry that I'm familiar with, and nobody wants to go to it. Why? Because it's like, well, who wants to go pray all night? That sounds like a lot. Well, what happens if you made that exclusive and you say only the volunteers who are the most committed get to come to all-night prayer with the pastoral team? Now it's an honor. Oh my gosh, I get to learn how to pray like the pastoral team. They're going to teach me. I get to just follow in their footsteps. You're going to have way more people that want to do that. And it sounds so much cooler when nobody else is invited. Now it's a privilege. It's an honor. Well, what if pastor invited, much like here at the internship, this works awesome. What if the pastor said, hey, if you have been in our youth ministry for, let's say, 4 years, and you're about to graduate high school for the year or two prior to graduation, and you've been really committed to our youth ministry, I'm going to create an internship. I'm going to create a discipleship program. And here's what I'm going to do. You get to come in 10 hours a week, 20, you can do it 40 hours a week. Who cares? Like whatever they can commit to. And you say, you're going to come with me. You're going to do everything I do with me every single day. And I'm just going to explain it while I do it. Okay. And now here's what happens on the front end. Is that an increase in resource expenditure? Yeah, because training is hard. But what happens after 90 days and you've shown them how to write a sermon 4 times 4, 8, 12, right? You've written 12 sermons and shown them how to do it. Guess what they're going to be able to do? Write a sermon. And then guess what you're going to be able to do? Start giving them opportunities to have experience. And now what can you do? You can actually start to hand off some of your load to people who actually want to learn how to do those skills. And what happens to the load? It goes down. And so the more you invest in the people around you and the more you strengthen them, the more you're going to be capable of. And Jesus knew that. That's why he tried to make 12 Jesuses, right? Christians means little Christ. He tried to make 12 of those. Why? Because when he left, he needed more people to run what he started. So I think we can definitely reproduce that, as you said, Sophie, is in a spiritual light in our ministries. And, ClickMail, we're a for-profit business. I'm trying to do that in a spiritual light here at ClickMail and in a practical, here are job skills. So, you can go out and get work. That too, and that's my goal. When people come into ClickMail, their lives are better. It is as close to a mini heaven as we can make in relationship. We work out issues. We communicate in a healthy way. Everybody's being prepared and poured into. And now we're all stronger and we can all lift each other up together. And that is why people keep wanting to come into these programs. That's why we have 800, subscribers into the subscription plan, the subscription course that we launched like 90 days ago, because that is what we're trying to create. When we structure things like this, we are going to see growth. So with that, thank you so much for being here with the ministry volunteer Doom Loop training. Love that. And yeah, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you in the next video. God bless.